Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if this is your first time here, welcome. Today we're going to do a little review slash thoughts on Fantastic Four, The First Steps. So I went to go see an early showing of this morning, and let me tell you, as soon as I walked out of the theater, I wanted to go right back in and watch it. This movie was amazing. Dare I say, fantastic. In fact, I'd probably say it's one of my new favorite MCU movies now. And that's saying something because I'm really into the MCU. Now, I'd have to go back and actually really think about all of the movies and where they would rank personally as far as my favorite, but I don't know, maybe I'll make a video about that. Let me know down in the comments if that's a video you'd be interested in checking out. Fantastic Four: The First Steps. What to say about this movie? First off, let me just let you know what I personally know of the Fantastic Four. I do know a fair amount. I've read a little bit of the comics, mostly the current run, but I am a little behind on that. I've seen the old movies. By old, okay. By old, there was a. By old, I mean the ones with Chris Evans, Captain America, as Human Torch. But when I, in my mind, when I think the older Fantastic Four movie, there was a, I believe, unreleased Fantastic Four movie. I can't remember when it came out, but I've seen several clips of it, and it was bad. In fact, hold on, let me see if I could bring that up real quick to at least find out when it came out or the time that it was filmed. Okay, it looks like it was 1994. Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, this is it. It was 1994 and it looked really bad. It looked really cheesy. But I don't know. Maybe I should find like a compilation of all the clips that exist. Does the movie actually exist as a whole somewhere to watch? If it does, maybe I should react to that. Anyway, that's what I think of when I say old Fantastic Four movie. But no, when I'm saying it, I mean the Chris Evans ones. So sorry, a little tangent there. Yes, I have seen those two movies. In fact, Rise of the Silver Surfer I actually enjoyed quite a bit. You know, say what you will about them. I know they're cheesy. That era of comic book movies, you know, wasn't the best, but it's what we had at the time, and I personally loved them. Let's see here. Okay, so yeah, I know a fair amount about the Fantastic Four. I feel like most people do just because of pop culture. So, you know, I know the origin story. I know a fair amount about each characters and their abilities. So going into this, I did have a little bit of background into the Fantastic Four itself. Okay, so I know a lot of people have been comparing it to Superman, and while they're completely different movies, you know, one's DC, one's Marvel, they're tonally different. There are two similarities that I could think of that's worth mentioning. The first one is just the fact that it's a superhero movie, that kind of thrusts you into a world that's already existing with superheroes in it. Honestly, I think that's a trend that they should keep up with because I feel like a lot of people are burnt out with origin stories. And while, you know, I do like a good origin stories, for those of us that have heard it time and time again, you know, we know Spider-Man's origin story, we know Superman's origin story, all these main characters, Batman, you know, they've kind of been ingrained into us through pop culture and other films and media that's been coming out over the years. So I feel like we're at a place now where they could start doing stuff like this more often and just kind of creating a pre-existing universe and just throwing us in and letting us have a good time. So that's one similarity I could think of between the two. Another is just, I talked about it in my Superman review, that comparing it to like the Snyderverse, that's more dark and brooding, whereas this new Superman movie is more light and hopeful. And while the MCU isn't particularly dark, I mean, it has its moments, but Fantastic Four feels like, trying to think of a good way to describe it, it does feel hopeful, similarly to Superman. Maybe it's because it's very family orientated, which makes sense because it's specifically about a family. And honestly, I think that's where this movie shines. At least one of the areas in which it shines is the fact that it's about this family, this literal family. We have Reed Richards and Sue Storm, who are husband and wife. We have Johnny Storm, who's the brother of Sue Storm and Reed's brother-in-law. And then we have Ben Grimm, who's Reed Richards' best friend and, you know, definitely a part of the family. So it's literally a movie about a family. And I think that in itself kind of gives it this more feel-good vibe to it. And speaking of vibe, even if the writing was crap, I would be sold just on the visual aesthetics alone. The whole 60s retro futuristic vibe is very appealing to look at, and it's kind of a fun setting to place this movie in. And also, I think Fantastic Four initially came out in the 60s, right? It was early 60s, 61, I believe. I read that somewhere. So it makes sense to have this film kind of set in this alternate world where it's like the vision of what the future would look like in the 60s, kind of like the Jetsons. So yeah, the whole visual aesthetic of it was just really fun to watch. That alone would be a good selling point for me. But that wasn't just the case. It wasn't just the visual aspect that made this movie so good. I thought the writing was great. Let me just say I'm in no means a writing expert. I'm no professional reviewer or critic. I'm just speaking from my own personal thoughts as a casual moviegoer who likes to be entertained. So I've no, knowledge on what makes a good story from a objective standpoint or anything like that. I just watch the movie and let you know how I feel about it. But I really feel that this film did well with keeping a focused story. It wasn't all over the place like a lot of superhero movies can be, and I really appreciated that. So let's talk about the characters a little bit. So we had Pedro Pascal as Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards. I think he did a great job. He did really well with the whole stoic, intelligent type who focuses more on the technical side of things than the emotional side of things, but that doesn't mean he's without emotion. He definitely has some emotional beats in here. He's not, devoid of emotion by any means at all. It's just he's one of those people that are so intelligent. His perspective could come across as a little more callous because that's just the way his mind works. He sees specific solutions to a problem, and it doesn't mean that he is going to go that route. It's just that is where his mind goes. It seeks out the possible routes to find a solution to a given problem that could, cause some issues with other family members who aren't as intelligently minded as Reed is. But yeah, he played that character very well, I think. And then we got, sorry if I'm looking off to the side, I'm just looking at the cast list, so I'm getting the names right. So yeah, Pedro Pascal did a great job. Vanessa Kirby, I feel like a lot of people are gonna like her performance the best, and it makes sense. She did a really great job. She played the emotional beats really well. She played the heroing bits very well. There's actually a scene later on in the movie where she's displaying some of her powers, and just you could see it in her face. It felt like really raw and natural, and like she was there doing this, crazy act. And then we have Joseph Quinn as Human Torch. Now, Human Torch for me personally was probably one of my favorites in the movie. I think that a lot of people will like his version of Human Torch because from what I do know of the character, just in general comics otherwise, I feel like he portrayed it really well. As far as, his love for the ladies, his kind of bickering with Ben Grimm, which that was also really fun to see, the two of them kind of going off of each other. They're kind of annoyed by each other, but also, love each other as family, which is really nice to see. So yeah, Human Torch, he was one of my personal favorites, and the visual effects on the flames were really good, especially when he was full flame on, and his eyes were just like glowing red, and it was really cool to see. And then we have, forgive me if I'm saying his name wrong, but Ebon Moss-Bachrach. I'm not exactly sure how to say that. As Ben Grimm, or the Thing. I really liked him in this. He was a very kind, gentle presence, which is a nice counterbalance to his, really big, rough exterior. And his and Human Torch's bickering all the time is always fun to see. And there's a couple moments, really subtle moments, where you see him kind of have this look in his eyes when he's watching something, almost like a sadness, when looking back at footage from before he got transformed. And that was a very nice, subtle performance within the motion capture, and that was really nice to see. So yeah, he was definitely a nice presence within the film itself. And that's another thing I like about the whole cast and all the characters in this movie, specifically within the family. You have, 4 different characters who feel like 4 different people that actually exist, that all respond to the same thing in different ways, but also mesh really well together as a cohesive unit. And they did a really good job with showing that. And for a movie that just jumps us into this pre-existing world with these characters that have already been doing their thing for a while, it didn't feel, it still felt like we knew them. It felt like that we've already spent a lot of time with them without actually spending a lot of time with them. And I think that's a testament to both the writing and the acting from these actors. So really good job with that. And then we have Julia Garner as Shalabal, aka Silver Surfer. I actually really liked her. I wish there would have been a little bit more of her character, but for the screen time that she did get, she did a great job. In fact, there was a scene with Silver Surfer and Human Torch that was really well done, I feel. It's quite an emotional scene. In my opinion, and I think they both acted that really well. And then there's Ralph Ineson, sorry if I'm not saying that right, Ralph Ineson as Galactus. Now, Galactus was insane. So I'm sure a lot of people that have seen the Rise of the Silver Surfer, the older Fantastic Four one, are going to be happy to see that Galactus is not a giant space cloud, but an actual very large being. And let me tell you, the trailers, the glimpses we see in the trailers don't do it justice, the massive scale of this guy. It is crazy. And then his booming voice. If you have the opportunity to see this in the theater, see it on the biggest screen with the loudest speakers you can. Incredible. Fantastic even. Hey, incredible and fantastic. The Incredibles were largely based on the Fantastic Four. And yeah, his character was very menacing, very scary, especially the first scene that we fully see him in. Very effective, very effective. All right, so as far as like the special effects and the CGI, I thought the whole thing was amazing, except for there were a couple moments, couple scenes, which I'm sure once you see it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, where the CG was, a little too obvious and not very good. But there's so much good in this movie that is the smallest of things. It doesn't take away from my enjoyment from the movie at all. It's just, you see it and you're like, oh, that's a little rough. Okay, we'll let it slide because everything else is amazing. But yeah, everything else really is amazing. It looks beautiful. They really nailed the aesthetic of this movie. They had a vision for it and they stuck with it and they really leaned into it. It was just incredible. And if I were to have one more complaint, if any, is there are a couple scenes that felt like there should have been a little bit of more space in between, kind of like it was a little rushed in the pacing, just a tad bit. Like there's a scene where they're talking about something that's about to happen and then it happens really quickly. It just felt a little odd, the pacing in that moment or two. But like I said, there's so much else that's so good about this movie that those two little gripes, the wonky CG in that specific area and a couple little rushed moments that felt slightly off as far as the pacing goes, those are just minuscule problems within otherwise fantastic movie. Oh yeah, one other thing I wanted to mention was relating to the fact that it's a story that kind of throws us into the mix when they're already out there existing in this world as the Fantastic Four. We have little glimpses into other characters that they have fought within the 3 or 4 years that they've been active. I can't remember that detail, but yeah, so it's kind of related to that. The fact that they do give us a little bit of exposition into their backstory of how they got together as scientists and explorers to go, out in space and discover, and then they got hit with the cosmic radiation, giving them their powers. So they do tell us that story, but they did it in a very clever way that felt natural. I know a lot of times when they do that, it feels like they just inserted it for the sake of exposition. But the way they did it was very clever, so it's not really spoiling much because anything I say that might seem like a spoiler, they've already revealed in trailers or special looks or anything like that. So in some of the trailers or clips that have been officially released, we hear the voiceover guy saying, like 4 astronauts going up in space, blah, 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 and so that's the kind of tone that they give the origin story in, and it actually worked really well because that kind of tone stayed consistent. It'd be one thing if it was just the one-off. They kind of did that style of explaining what happened and then that's the last we kind of hear of that. But no, throughout the film, you kind of get these, this host guy kind of talking about what's going on the news, or what's going on with the Fantastic Four and stuff. So it stays consistent throughout the movie, so it doesn't feel like it was just thrown in there just for the sake of trying to give us an origin story. So they did a really good job with that. Now, I know there was a lot of speculation as to how this is going to fit into the MCU in terms of how our characters are going to enter our main MCU timeline, because this is set in a different universe, a different Earth 858, something like that. And I believe we're in the MCU proper, we're 616, I believe. So there's a lot of theories, speculation, and all the ones I heard, no, they didn't even do that. So you might end this movie still wondering how it's going to happen, which I actually still like, because it still keeps it self-contained, beginning to end. There is a mid-credit scene that does have allusions to something, but once you see it for yourself, you'll know it's something that the fans will understand. But even if you don't know what's going on, it's still intriguing enough. And then there's a little fun post-credit scene that it's fun, but it's not necessary. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about this movie. It was great. It's fantastic. I loved it. I want to go see it again. And if you have the chance to see it in the theater, do that. All right, well, I'll go ahead and leave it at that, and we will see you guys next time we do a movie review. Or if you want to check out any of my other videos, I do reactions to Gurren Lagann, Spider-Man the Animated Series, and Attack on Titan, and there's a couple other videos out there as well, some reviews, a couple other reactions. So if you're interested in checking that out, go ahead and do so. And if you haven't already, like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see me put out some more content like this. And we'll see you next time. Have a good day.